Hey everyone, welcome back to another Roman Reacts. We are here today to watch another big video that just came out. So I was originally planning on doing a few other videos that I normally would do. However, Janovich on his channel released the second parts to the Damocles Gulf Crusade. So we're going to be I already watched the first one and I really enjoyed it. So we're going to be continuing to watch more Warhammer lore and being able to understand and how things went. So yeah, we're going to be just having some fun with this and have a good time, okay? Now, one thing's for certain about this is that when it comes to Janovich, he really puts stuff in detail. I know that Wizards of Warriors, they do a fair amount of attempting to create like some kind of good visualization, but I feel like Janovich just like really takes it a step further when it comes to like showing all the details of like what has happened during that time period. So we're going to be giving this a watch regardless, and you know what that means. It's a long one, so popcorn is assured along with a drink. So not sponsored, by the way. But yeah, let's dive on in and learn all about the history of the Damocles Crusades. Cryptman. That's Cryptman. Like the new logo.
As you may know, I just became a father, and that means I'm pretty much sleep deprived and have very little time. So when I got an offer from Factor for their prepped meals, I was like, yeah, this is definitely the perfect timing, let's give it a try. When I looked at their offering, I was excited because this is pretty much the type of food that I already like, so I didn't have to do customizations and just went with their weekly recommendation. But if there's any dish on the menu that you don't like, of course you can switch it out for something that you prefer. There's plenty of choice with some really nice recipes, so you absolutely won't be disappointed there. For my first box, I got 10 meals that I've been eating together with my wife, and we've definitely been enjoying them. Even the cat seems to be into it. The food is ready within a few minutes, either in the microwave or the oven. You don't have to buy groceries, there's no cooking, there are no dishes, so none of the stress of having to make a meal yourself. It's better than the off-price junk food here because for me, a Factor meal actually costs less than going to a fast food restaurant, and meanwhile, Factor is faster, healthier and tastes better. So if you're already getting food delivered, this may actually be the best option. Factor has allowed me to spend more time with my new child and making lore videos for you guys, while still eating nutritious and tasty foods. I also want to make a note about the quality ingredients they put into the meals. Salmon and chicken are pretty expensive over here in the supermarket, and Factor provides pretty substantial cuts, so I feel like I'm definitely getting good value for money there. By using my link, you get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% of the next 4 boxes. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone.
When the large landers of the Imperium made planetfall, a large number of Tau aircraft took to the sky in an attempt to contest the landing. Imperial naval fighters met the foe head-on in dogfights, and the counterattack proved unsuccessful in repelling the invaders. The eastern coast of Dalyth's largest continent had been selected as the target for the landing, with their landing site protected to the north by mountains and to the east by the sea, and the only way forward was southwest towards the Tau cities along the coastline. The first target of their conquest would be the city of Galbren. All Tau ground forces in the wider area had rendezvoused and formed a stable defensive line blocking the path along the coast. The important city was not allowed to be captured. Given their fortified position, they expected to be able to hold out against anything the Imperium could muster. Surely many warriors would perish, but the Firecast would willingly do so in the name of the greater good. As the army disembarked, so did the large Titan transports of the Mechanicum touch down to unload their cargo. The god machines of Legio Thanatris marched forward. As legend has it, the ignorant Tau must have wondered why the strange pointy mountains in the distance seemed to be getting closer. It wouldn't be long before they familiarized themselves with the concept of Titan shock. Enormous explosions tore into their ranks as they came under attack by the god machine's colossal weapons. With Titans at their spearhead, the Imperial forces crashed into the defensive line. Within moments, the Tau positions crumbled and panicked. Their losses were innumerable as the unstoppable Titans crushed them beneath their feet. Supported by tanks, they destroyed the lines with impunity and scattered the puny Xenos before them. However, the Tau would quickly learn from the humiliating defeat. As the survivors trickled into their rear, they recovered their composure and for the time being would adopt guerrilla tactics. Instead of facing the Crusaders in pitched battle, all along the road towards Galbren they harassed them from all sides. They used the terrain to great effect, only striking when they had an easy escape route to avoid direct confrontation. They even managed to lure impatient retaliating Imperial troops into several ambushes. The Crusaders marched on towards their target regardless. Despite the severely annoying and cowardly tactics of the Tau, the damage was minimal. Gradually, however, the coherency of the Imperial advance was broken up, until by the time they reached the outskirts of Galbren, they were split into 3 separate spearheads. The main force that made up the bulk was still led by Legio Thanatris, supported by tanks and Imperial Guard troops. Although the Titans were protected by their void shields, they found themselves hindered by suppressing firestorms of missiles launched by the large Manta gunships. The second force was predominantly made up of veterans from the Rakashian rifles, whose intelligent use of cover kept them mostly out of harm's way of the never-ending harassment. This allowed them to advance further towards their objective than the others. However, they soon found themselves embroiled in the city's outskirts, engaging with crude warriors at close range. Fighting from building to building, the urban combat was extremely slow-going. The final formation was made up of Space Marines from the Iron Hands, Ultramarines, and Scythes of the Emperor chapters. These elite troops were being held at bay by the Tau's own elite shock troops wielding crisis battlesuits. These powerful exosuits worn by the Firecast allowed them to fight on even footing with the Astartes. Their powerful plasma weapons proved effective against their ceramite armor. All 3 spearheads found their formations pretty much stalled near the outskirts of Galbren. To break the stalemate, more Ultramarines would be deployed. Assault Marines from the 8th Company, led by Captain Leto Atheus, rained from the skies. They were split into several squads. One of these was led by Sergeant Cato Sicarius, a headstrong warrior who would later rise to notable prominence within the Ultramarines chapter himself. Using drop pods and disembarking from Thunderhawks with their jump packs, they would strike the Tau in the rear. Given that the skies above Galbren were still heavily contested and neither side had achieved aerial dominance yet, the drop approach bordered on recklessness. The risks they took chafed at the very limits of what the Codex Astartes doctrines allowed. But reprimands would have to wait. Despite coming under heavy fire, their method was not without results. Reaching the surface behind enemy lines, the Assault Marines were able to get into close-quarters combat and slaughter the Xenos defenders with impunity. The Tau Hunter cadres attempted to turn the tide by deploying their fast-moving crisis suits against them. The counterattack was led by the Commander Oshova, better known as Commander Farsight, who was operating his cutting-edge XV-8 crisis battlesuit. As the favored protege of the legendary warrior and tactician Puretide, Farsight's reputation preceded him. He personally joined the thick of battle, proving himself once more a formidable warrior leader. The Assault Marines understood that this was their opportunity to cut the head from the snake. Sergeant Numator and Cato Sicarius immediately prioritized targeting Farsight. This was easier said than done. In stark contrast to the poor melee capabilities of the Xenos infantry, the highly advanced XV-8 battlesuits proved quite the formidable foe in close-quarter combat. This experience led to the Ultramarines reconsidering the Tau's martial prowess. But despite the Tau's high tech, through brutal determination, the Astartes eventually managed to deal a crippling blow. Farsight's badly damaged and disabled battlesuit crashed down into a body of water called the Galbren Basin. He would have drowned right there if not for his limited Earthcast knowledge. Forcing his suit to perform a quick auto repairs, he was able to recover its functionality just in time, allowing the exosuit to regain enough power to limp to safety. Narrowly escaping death, but unable to continue the fight, he was forced to retreat. With their commander out of action, the teams of crisis battlesuits lost their cohesion, and the Tau resolve in this sector was inevitably crushed. The battle for Galbren was far from over. Millions of Tau had been killed in the fighting, but yet millions more held out in the city. Despite war raging on at their very doorstep, Galbren seemed surprisingly calm. A siege by Astartes against a normal foe would have caused widespread panic and disorder within the population, with masses fleeing uncontrollably before the fires of battle, but not the Tau. Watercast propaganda proved supremely effective, soothing the population and assuring them of an inevitable Tau victory. It was the duty of all citizens to continue with their assigned daily routines, as dictated by their strict caste system. The Firecast would protect them for the greater good, so there was simply no need to panic. In fact, the Earthcast builders continued restoring their damaged buildings in the middle of the active war zone. This infuriating arrogance fueled the Imperials' hatred towards the Xenos even more. Despite the Ultramarines' 8th Company's successes, the other spearheads were still facing stalemate. Unable to conquer the entire city on their own, at least not without suffering crippling amounts of casualties, the Astartes were forced to stand down. The Assault Marines were ordered to return to their own lines, but this was easier said than done. The enemy recovered from the onslaught and stabilized their formations. Soon, countless battle drones mobilized and harassed the withdrawing Ultramarines from every angle. Furthermore, the Imperium had not yet attained aerial supremacy. Dogfights between fightercraft continuously raged on above the city. Tau bombers were operating freely in the area. Their pilots now had the withdrawing Ultramarines in their sights and performed strafing runs against their squads. Not able to rely on their own air support, the assault troops were fired upon like fish in a barrel. According to the Codex Astartes, the assault marine jump packs did not have enough capacity to reach an altitude high enough to contest the bombers. But the stubborn Cato Sicarius held a different notion. He asked one of his comrades to hand over his jump pack, with an extra booster in reserve. The sergeant made for the high rise of the surrounding buildings. Standing on the roof of one of the tall structures, at just the right moment, he leapt into the air with thrusters burning full power. When the fuel of his first jump pack ran out midair, he switched to the jets of the second one and rose even further. Completely exhausting the Prometheum, he reached just high enough to intersect the bombers during one of their strafing runs. Unable to evade in time, the desperate pilots deployed their defense drones. But their AI systems had not been programmed to adequately respond to the ludicrously unlikely occurrence of ground infantry attacking their aircraft, and so could not respond effectively. In midair, Sicarius now fired his close-ranged weapons, hitting the pilots and crucial engine parts. Several of the aircraft were instantly disabled and began crashing towards the surface. Rather than free-falling back to the ground himself, Sicarius latched himself onto one of the bombers. The tremendous weight of his power armor unbalanced the delicate flyer, and it tilted on a crash course towards the ground. In a clatter of ceramite, Cato Sicarius smashed into solid ground, but because of his power armor survived the rough landing. The same could not be said for the Tau aircraft or its pilots. The crazy maneuver severely disrupted the remaining bomber formation and allowed the Ultramarines time to reach the safety of the Tau habitation zones, where they continued to slaughter a path all the way back towards the Imperial lines. The front lines solidified, and the intensity of the battle quieted down. The lull in the fighting was readily welcomed by the Tau, who still reeled from what in their experience was an astronomically high death toll. Even in their conflicts with the Orcs, they had not suffered such devastations. Their strategists required more time to develop methods to effectively deal with humanity's brutal tactics. The Titans especially were a major cause of headaches. The Tau could not fathom humanity's weird rationale behind spending so many resources on these incredibly inefficient walking fortresses, but ironically, they had not yet found a way to bring them down. In fact, it took a lot of sustained heavy firepower to keep the Titans merely in check, and so they continued to be at the mercy of the God Machine's massive weapon. Optimistically deluded as always, however, the Tau were confident that they would eventually learn and adapt. For now, they were more than happy to only engage the Imperium at a distance. This was, after all, the way of war to which their weapons, doctrines, and training were most attuned to. There was little doubt the Imperium would soon be closing in again, and the Tau realized they needed to inflict as much damage as possible while the situation was still in their favor. But the Crusade wasn't content being held at bay at Galbren. The city had proved a hard nut to crack, but because the Tau had committed nearly all of their military to the defense of the important capital, other cities and towns on the planet were left less heavily defended. And so while the main bulk of forces pinned down the Tau, the more mobile elements of the Astartes forces spread across the planet to assault easier targets. Although the Astra Militarum was more accustomed to losing huge amounts of troops and material in battle, out here in the heart of Tau-controlled space, resupply was difficult. Whenever they had run out of munitions, bayonet charges had proven surprisingly effective against the physically weak Tau, but far too costly. Plenty of reinforcements had been promised, but so far few, if any, had reached all the way to Dalyth. Until a reliable logistical route was established to reinforce the Crusade's spear tip, sustained heavy losses could not be afforded. And so, for the time being, Commander-in-Chief Wendell Gage, leader of the Imperial Guard regiments, advocated that the Imperial Guard should dig in to protect themselves against the enemy's long-range weapons. For now, the siege of Dalyth would continue mostly by bombarding the city with artillery, and by striking it with their fleet from orbit. Command would have to come up with a new plan before the siege could continue in earnest. But the Tau were not the only alien race bothering the Imperium within the eastern fringe. Neither are the savage orcs the most formidable foe they would face. A far more...
Just quick note, it's so amazing to me how close the Tau Empire and its proxies with all the worlds there are so close to Macragge and Ultramar and the 500 worlds. It makes you wonder, like, what stories are there that can show the differences, but how close they'll get to each other until the two sides eventually come to butt heads again. So
sinister threat was
I would definitely like to see something where Gilliman meets Commander Farside or something. That would be a really cool meetup.
Amassing in the far galactic east, inducing a psychic darkness that loomed before its pending arrival. On the far outskirts of the Ultima Segmentum, on the planet of Tyron Primus, a single Imperial research outpost manned by the Mechanicus was stationed. In 745 M41, all communications with the planet suddenly fell silent. It was to be the first among many. As months followed, more worlds mysteriously lost contact with the Imperium. At first, the bureaucracy hardly bothered looking into it. After all, the Tau's expansionism had hardly been noticed either, and these far-out worlds were of even less significance than the ones near the Damocles Gulf, for hardly any resources or taxes could be collected from this region. But when the trend of perfectly compliant worlds suddenly going silent continued, Inquisitor Fidus Cryptman of the Ordo Xenos was the first to express his worries. His intuition told him that something much more serious than mere rebellion or minor alien invasion was going on, and so he personally traveled to Tyron to investigate. Arriving there, he found the former ocean world to have become a death world, devoid of any signs of life. The planet had been completely stripped of all forms of biomatter. The strange anomaly did not seem to be caused by a natural disaster, nor did it match with the devastation wrought by any Xenos in his extensive records. Cryptman was determined to find out what ill fate had befallen the planet. Imperial archives indicated that the frontier world had been garrisoned by a surprisingly formidable Skitarii force, and protected by several powerful defense lasers. Surely if there had been a battle, the Mechanicus would have recorded copious amounts of data of it. Examining the outpost's surviving database, he learned that there had indeed been a battle against a yet undiscovered species of Xenos. They had not been forewarned of their coming because the bioships had not been detected before they were already at the very doorstep, nor could they call for aid or warn the Imperium, for the invasion was preceded by a psychic veil that hindered astropathic communications. Thousands of mycetic spores rained from the skies, and the invasion began. Within a few hours, the outpost had been overrun. During the final moments of resistance, the local Archmagos had made sure that data records of video and pict feeds of the battle were securely stored away safely underground. This turned out to be the planet's most crucial legacy, as the invaluable information from Cryptman's first understanding of the new Xenos threat that would later be called the Tyranids, named after the Imperial planet that had first fallen victim to it. He decided to follow the trail of lost planets, learning to his horror that the same disaster had taken place everywhere he went. Entire worlds known to once have been verdant planets, teeming with all manner of human, alien, or plant life, had been stripped bare and reduced to barren rocks floating in the void. Not one speck of life, not even the simplest of bacteria, remained to be found on any of them. Grasping the magnitude of the cataclysmic threat, Cryptman ordered his astropath to send a distress call to the Imperium, but the Psyker could not penetrate the warp turmoil left by the passing of the alien fleet. In desperation, he made haste towards Thandros 1, where a telepathic matrix was located that could be used to boost interstellar communication. On his arrival there, he found out that he had been far too late. for they had already fallen victim to the Tyranid invasion. The Thanatos system had fought and died alone. Analyzing the pattern of fallen planets, Cryptman was able to interpolate the invasion's direction. It appeared that the Hive Fleet was headed for the realm of Ultramar. With no way to contact the Ultramarines, the only thing he could hope for was to arrive there before the Tyranids would. With no time to lose, he traveled to Macragge. By the grace of the Emperor, he arrived on time and was able to convey the warning. But the chapter master, Marneus Calgar, was still on Dalyth, leading his troops, and it would take time before he could be reached. In the meantime, they took the warning with utmost seriousness. The Ultramarines chapter on Garrison and Ultramar prepared themselves for the greatest battle in their history. It would remain to be seen if the tactics and strategies of the Codex Astartes, their most venerated tome written by the very Primarch Rabute Gilliman himself, would prove sufficient. As dictated by Imperial tradition, the alien fleet would be codified with an ancient and foreboding name from human legend. Hive Fleet Behemoth. The first tyrannic war was about to begin.
Saw the stars. Yikes.
Meanwhile, the Battle of Dalyth raged on. Xenos reinforcements had arrived on the planet in great numbers from all over their empire. They were ready to throw in everything it had to ensure the crusade would be stopped here on Dalyth. If they failed, there would be no telling what devastation the Crusaders would be able to inflict against their other sept worlds. But a new Imperial assault called Operation Hydra had been set into motion. Command's new plan to unleash large-scale psychic warfare upon the unsuspecting enemy had met with great success. Having never faced arcane warfare of such a magnitude before, the Tau had not developed any doctrines with which to counter them. Despite their drastic increase in troops to defend the planet, the war did not seem to go in their favor. To make things worse, the Firecaste had recently suffered a great setback. In their desperation, one of the most talented Earthcaste scientists had developed a device that was designed to medically transfer the sum total of legendary Commander Puretite's strategic knowledge directly into the Firecaste leadership brains, providing each and every one of them with instant military genius. Having the contents of their brains altered, they would lose their individuality. But in the name of the greater good, this was but a small price to pay. The device worked as intended, effectively turning each of the participants into affluent Puretide clones. This breakthrough in Earthcaste science initially seemed to turn the tide of the war, as the Tau forces were able to fight with a renewed efficiency. But Puretide, although a brilliant tactician, had never encountered psychers in his lifetime before. The experimental gamble horribly backfired, as the Firecaste commanders, their minds shackled by pre-programmed doctrines, proved incapable of improvising against the new threat. With the wave of weaponized psychers now crashing against their lines, this mistake would cost them dearly. This left the fate of the entire army in the hands of the handful who had not yet undergone the procedure, including Commander Farsight and Shadowsun. The unpredictable nature of arcane warfare proved difficult to counter even for them. Despite their best efforts, the crusading forces were able to push their advantage. In the wake of the carnage, the Titans and Brimlock legions broke through the Tau defenses and captured a bridge across the river into Galbrin. Over the rest of the day, a running battle was fought that resulted with a large part of the Tau forces nearly getting encircled, with their backs against the sea. During the night, the Tau escaped the pocket and abandoned this part of the city. This allowed the Imperial forces to capture the prized starport and easily bring reserves into battle. With the momentum on their side, they continued to pressure the defenders on all sides. Although the Imperium already knew of the Tau caste system, they only recently learned of the fifth leadership caste called the Ethereals. It was now theorized that if these were taken out, the Tau war effort would swiftly crumble, and so they pushed towards the city's center, where the Ethereal headquarters was estimated to be. The Tau's refusal to evacuate the city now came back to haunt them. Once more, the Ultramarines' 8th Company would be in the middle of the action. They were ordered to deep strike right into the heart of the city. Former Captain Leto Atheus had fallen in battle earlier, and so the honor of leading the assault was now given to the newly assigned Captain Numator, who had been freshly promoted by Marneus Calgar himself. The crusading forces were within striking range of their objective, but the cunning Tau would no doubt have been busy preparing an ambush using the Ethereal building as bait. The Imperial Guard forces would apply pressure on all fronts, while the Astartes would mobilize a full-scale armored assault to draw the defenders' main attention. Meanwhile, the 8th would once again rain from the skies right at the heart of the enemy's position.
I see that Horus up there. That's the incorrect. Sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but had to point that out.
And this time truly cut the head from the snake. The amount of troops involved in the stage of Operation Hydra were massive. The Tau would certainly be crushed. With all troops in place, the final hammer blow against Galbren was about to take place, and the attack signal had been given. Millions of guardsmen moved against fortified positions, while the large combined forces of Space Marine vehicles rolled forward on the main roads towards the heart of the city. But right as the attack commenced, Chapter Master Manius Calgar received the news of the Tyranid invasion, and immediately decided to withdraw the Ultramarines from battle to reinforce their home worlds. Recent reconnaissance had indicated that the scale of the threat was even worse than anticipated by Inquisitor Cryptman, so he would need every warrior at his disposal to battle the Tyranids. The extermination of the Tau would have to wait. The sudden change of events left a gaping hole in the Crusaders' battle plan. Without the 8th Company here to deal the crippling blow, the strategy would fall apart. Captain Numitor, ready to deploy his squads from the Thunderhawks, received the orders to cancel the attack. His strike had been the linchpin of the whole operation, so despite direct orders from his chapter master, he decided to commit to the drop mission. He told his squads to commence their planned attack, and so the assault marines rained from the skies, determined to first kill the Ethereals on Dalyth. While the Battle of Operation Hydra raged on, large portions of the Ultramarines chapter were already en route to Ultramar with all haste. This sudden departure did of course not go unnoticed. News of this new Tyranid invasion spread throughout the Crusade fleet. Uncertainty about the new threat led to disagreements between commanders. More and more troops were being called, while others kept pressing on the attack. The captured starport of Galbren was now used to swiftly evacuate troops from the planet. Operation Hydra was falling apart. This scene was not just unique to Dalyth, but happened on other besieged planets as well. Although the disorder did of course greatly benefit the Tau, they were not out of trouble yet. Despite the massive retreats, the 8th Company had managed to fight their way towards the Tau leadership. The ethereal cast bodyguards were little match for the assault marines, and the ethereals on Dalyth were now in mortal danger. Their loss could not be risked, and so they were forced to deploy a weapon of last resort that had been held in reserve for just such a moment. An advanced electromagnetic pulse weapon enveloped the city, disrupting all electronic devices and bringing both armies to an effective standstill. Tau, pulse rifles, battlesuits, and drones all stopped working, but so did the Astartes' power armor and vehicles. Only the most basic equipment was still operational. Guardsmen on foot would be able to equip their bayonets. Artillery with explosive ordnance would be able to keep firing, but without targeting assistance or communication, there was little point. The 8th Company had been on the brink of victory, but now found themselves locked inside near unmovable suits of disabled power armor. Crude mercenaries could continue fighting unhindered, but had been ordered to stand down. Rather than use this opportunity to kill the Space Marines at their moment of weakness, the Ethereals began negotiating a truce. Although oblivious to the real reason why the Imperium's forces were evacuating, they saw little reason to get in the way. If the Crusaders would promise to cease their military operations, then the Ethereals would grant all Imperial forces a safe passage out of Tau space. The electromagnetic interference was a neat trick by the cowardly alien. Under normal circumstances, it would have been considered a severe setback, but would have only served to delay the inevitable Imperial victory. In the worst-case scenario, they would have simply deployed Exterminatus-grade weaponry to destroy the planet from orbit. But given that half the crusading forces were already on their way home to fend off the Tyranids, the remaining troops had to admit the Damocles Gulf Crusade had run out of steam and reluctantly agreed to the truce. For now, the ceasefire was honored by both sides. The Imperial forces were allowed to retreat in good order, abandoning the planets they had conquered as per agreement. Many of the ships merged with Battlefleet Tempestus and prepared to battle the High Fleet within short order. There was little doubt in their minds that once the Tyranids were dealt with, the Imperium would be back to defeat the Tau once and for all. Like a sword hanging above their blue necks, the xenophobic spirit that gave rise to the Damocles Gulf Crusade would always be there. The Tau no doubt counted their blessings. In this sudden change of fortunes, They had almost tasted defeat, and this war had taught them some hard-earned lessons. In the aftermath, many billions of their wretched kind lay dead, and their ravaged empire was left to lick its wounds. Needless to say, these lessons were short-lived. Before long, the Watercast broadcasted empire-wide propaganda campaigns depicting tales of the heroic Firecast going toe-to-toe with hordes of the Imperium's most fearsome warriors and coming out on top. So too were the other casts praised for their unwavering contributions to the war effort. In reality, they had faced but a fraction of humanity's total forces and barely lived to tell the tale. The Ethereals would never swallow their pride and admit that in the vastness of the galaxy, they remain but an insignificant species, at the mercy of greater powers to be snuffed out at any moment. For the delusional Tau, one thing was certain: the greater good had prevailed. They were still unaware as to what had caused the Crusade to suddenly collapse. Obviously, the Imperium had not informed them of the Tyranid invasion. By now, High Fleet Behemoth had reached Macragge. Marneus Calgar and his chapter were embroiled in a bitter war for survival. So were several other Imperial worlds. The fate of Ultramar would be decided by the outcome of this battle. Whilst the First Tyrannic War raged on, and the High Fleet clashed upon the rocks of the Imperium's indomitable defiance, several splinter fleets began to break off in search of easier prey. One of these, Splinter Fleet Gorgon, made its way towards the galactic north, en route to devour the biomass of the still recovering Tau Empire. If the naive Tau still considered their brief encounters with humanity the worst that the galaxy could ever throw at them, they were in for a rude awakening.
Oh boy. Man, it's so crazy to me. I did not know, for me, I did not know that the Damocles Gulf Crusade also coincided with the first tyrannic invasion with High Fleet Behemoth, and then causing everything to just continuously like move from there. It's so fascinating to me. Like, you hear these little tidbits, little things here and there that pushes the narrative and the story forward. And now, for us, this is like set at least, I think, 500 or plus years or so, or even more, from when the main storyline takes place in Warhammer 40k. So for this, we're just hearing bits and pieces of everything and how it all went down. And Critman, as ancient as that guy is, managed to figure out about the Tyranids. He's able to figure out their plans, their little strategies, and like what they do, and is able to warn Ultramar. And now you have the entire galaxy, like the Imperium, like seeing like this is a big threat. The Ultramarines are in danger. Help is on the way, and like for the Tau, it's surprising me to that they just are so ignorant to thinking we're so superior, we're so good, and then all of a sudden, woof, of Tyranids coming in, and like they just can't stop them easily enough. And it just, especially the last ditch effort to try to use an EMP to knock out all the electronics and systems. Like, sure, they could have dealt a big blow to the Ultramarines who were stuck in their power armor. I think Cato Sicarius was also among those that got like trapped within his own armor, and kept saying all these things against the Tau Watercast that will eventually get you or something like that. But like the Tau like graciously allowed them to live, and their numbers were needed to help in the defense of Ultramar. And it's so interesting how all these little things take place, and for the Tau, I can't wait to see what comes next for like what's the next little expansion. I think it was this second, or they're about to have their second sphere expansion, then the third, fourth, fifth, and up to the main thing. So I can't wait for the next one. So props to you, Janovich, and for creating this. This has been fascinating and amazing. I cannot wait for more. And yeah, I'll leave a link in the description for the original video. You can check out Janovich over here if you wish. I'll check something random over here, including the subscribe button. You would definitely help out for this channel. And I'll catch you all in the next one, okay, guys? So Romans, salute.
If you like Romans content and wish to see more, like and subscribe to continue to support the channel.